Righto.
Welcome back to...
Wait, corner of the table is menacing. Okay, I'm ready.
Welcome back to 10-minute talks with Seeka Strength in our new studio. So this is the first video you'll probably have seen in our new renovated studio. It's actually the same studio. It's just with the movie magic that we have changed it up. And we're back with another 10-minute talk. Today's 10-minute talk is the topic of just try not to get triggered. You know, this is coming along from those Instagram comments that we're talking about and the kind of nutrition thing.
Yeah.
Gonna start the timer there?
Oh, we're getting right in.
Well, like that's a 10-minute
The timer is on. 10 minutes has started. I'm not sure when this started happening, but it's definitely a recent thing. I'm not sure when this started happening, but it's definitely massively increased or accelerated in the last year or so.
I'll tell you, actually, so when we talk about getting triggered, we're talking about it in relation to pretty much everything. Like, I've seen this and stuff where Instagram is prompting baby stuff to me, and there'll be mothers getting triggered. Other mothers, like, aggressively telling them, like, someone will be holding a baby in a particular fashion, and then loads of comments will be like, can't believe she's holding the baby like that. That baby's about to die. You know, there's just loads of things like that. And it seems to be, I'm wondering if it is something to do with the algorithm, but you see it a lot on Instagram. And I know we've talked about this a few times already on these kind of 10-minute talks, or not a few times, but we've talked about it. But it's, we want to talk about it today more, and just be careful if you fall into that fashion, you know. And a lot of times we kind of want to talk about just be happy you're training in some regards. You know, a lot of times people get caught up in the methodologies and the kind of style of training people use, and you see different comments. But I think it's very important just to be happy, not only for yourself in your training, but also be happy for other people when they're training or whatever they're doing. You know, we saw that Steinben lift, and we saw people, you know, commenting on that, or when we've seen that gentleman pressing 200 kilos from pins, you know, and there's a load of negative comments. But I can only assume those comments are coming from people who themselves are very unhappy, and it's some form of kind of lashing out or some kind of projecting.
I really think it does start within, you know. You'll rarely have someone in a great position. Everything's going great for them with their training. Everything's going great for them outside of training. And now suddenly they want to start bashing people or drawing people down. We definitely see it with athletes where things mightn't be going perfect in their training or in their recovery of rehab, or maybe in their progressions from week to week. And then suddenly that starts affecting their mood, both in training and out of training, you know. And I think that's the first place you should look, that if you're weightlifting or powerlifting or just going to the gym on a regular basis, and your sessions and the outcomes of your sessions, and whether you're hitting numbers or whether you're hitting volume or whether your goals for the month or goals for the year are being hit, if that's having a major negative effect on your kind of personality or how you feel from day to day, you really need to look at exercise, and you need to look at the sport you're doing and say, okay, these two things aren't congruent. You know, like, I should not be focusing on this style of training if this style of training really disappoints me. Like, the example of that I always come back to is weightlifting. Weightlifting is a very, very cognitively demanding endeavor. You think about the technique a lot. No matter how much training you put in, a lot of the time it mightn't get better, it mightn't change. Maybe you're doing all of the correct things and you're just not looking at this particular aspect of technique, or your load is slightly off, and you're never going to make progress. And if you're somebody whose everyday well-being is being negatively affected because of that, you should look at weightlifting as maybe not the best option for you right now. Go and look at some other coping mechanisms, and then come back to weightlifting afterwards, you know.
I have a question on coping mechanisms, but I think, you know, it's not that we're bringing this up because we get a load of mean comments or anything. Like, it's very rare that we get any negative comments, to be honest, on YouTube, unless the video goes very, very viral or gets quite large, you know, to the hundreds of thousands or something like that, before you start seeing those kind of... There's actually like a threshold. Once you get over like 50,000 views in a video, you start getting the dumb cunts commenting. But our regular viewership don't really comment this. But, and I suppose we're probably maybe preaching to the wrong crowd, but we can't preach to anyone else, I suppose. But it's
nobody else is listening.
It's definitely important, even if you're not vocal about it in people's comments, you're not commenting on Instagram and stuff like that, you're not one of those people, but you do find yourself seeing someone talk to me about training, or seeing someone maybe not even related to training on anything, and you find yourself getting annoyed about it, you know, and this is kind of relations like the nutrition thing we're talking about and the politicizing of the nutrition. It's very important just to be kind of like, oh, you know, you don't have to have an opinion on everything. You know, you can choose not to have an opinion, and it'll be much better for you in the long run, much better for your own training, but also just much better for your general happiness if you look at those things and you go, oh yeah, you see something that would annoy you, you know, and we've all been there, and we do get annoyed at things when we see them. And but I think the last few years since we've been doing our own thing more often, where it's kind of like, okay, it's up to people to do whatever. I think a big symptom of this, or an interesting symptom of this, for a while, I haven't seen it as much anymore, but for a period of time, particularly last year, and it was again on Instagram, it was this torrent of like meme pages about people, and a lot of them went really after really personal ones. And I remember it kind of peaked for me with the Shane Hunt thing. Remember that? So Shane Hunt was talking about nose breeding and saying it was a better option than mouth breeding, and there's loads of great research to support Shane, but Shane was being kind of funny in relation to these comments. They messaged him saying, can you support this or anything, and he was like, meme me, I want you to do it, and stuff like that. You know, he wasn't taking them seriously. And I think that was an interesting symptom of that, that they were going after people personally on that, rather than doing what we do. Well, it's like, okay, we're not going to be calling people out, and that's the thing we really try and stay away from. For example, when we're doing reaction videos, you know, we try and only do positive reaction videos. We only try to do it with sports and athletes who do really good things, so we can highlight the good things. I know sometimes we've done the not good things, but we try to do it in a scenario where it's like, this is why you shouldn't do this. This isn't... You know, we have a kind of a carte blanche company policy, which is to never call out other coaches in relation to these things. We just, what that athlete is doing in the context they're doing it in, try and put it into perspective. And very often, you know, because a lot of times the athletes see it. Yeah. More recently, anytime we do athletes, most of the time those athletes see it. And they'll message us, you know, and they'll be like, oh, I saw your video on it, that was great. This is what
even really big athletes like Harry Akins. Yep. You know, after that video... like you always, even if the athlete themselves doesn't see it, somebody associated with that athlete might see it.
Or you'll send it to that athlete and then they'll see it. You know?
And that is, I think it's important to always view things through a positive viewpoint. You know, like you can't go around the world thinking that it's all puppies and lampshades and rainbows and butterflies.
Lampshades.
Yeah. Lampshades are very whimsical. Like.
Go on, so.
But in terms of your sport... People take sport incredibly seriously, right? We take sport incredibly seriously. It's literally our full-time job. Mm-hmm. But for most people, when they're training and they're in the gym or they're on the track or they're on the road or whatever, that's a good thing you do. You do it because it relieves some stress, or it increases your physical capabilities and you'll feel better because of it, or it might inadvertently increase your confidence, or you might live longer, you might feel healthier, you might be a better member of society because you're there. And the sport itself is a positive, it's a net positive thing for you. And you should never ever lose sight of that, you know. I think a lot of time people feel the more emotionally invested they get in the sport or the hobby or the pastime or whatever it is, the better they are. So if I'm more emotionally invested and I put more of my thought into this and more of if I have a larger emotional outburst following the good things and following the bad things, it's better. It's very, very rarely better.
Are you saying I should give up jiu-jitsu and weightlifting because they make me really angry?
Yes.
It's very interesting. But I think in relation to the content, that's why we try and make that really positive stuff, or make the stuff that we think is best, you know. And it's like one of our friends, Aaron, Scott University, really nice gentleman, very, very helpful, was kind of I'm not going to say victim, was the subject of a lot of those for a while, and no comment on how valid their claims are. You know, I think the better way of doing it is make your own stuff, think what you think is right, putting out that stuff. I think people respond to it better, but it's also just better for the entire community in general.
But also it's a great proving ground, you know.
Yeah.
Like scientific study is not published until it's peer reviewed. Mm-hmm. And then when it's, even after it gets published, then there's a whole kind of arena of criticism around it. You have papers.
We do that a lot.
And we do that a lot. The best way, if you have an idea about something, and say Gerf puts up a post about squatting or whatever it is, if you have an idea about something and you think, oh, I don't agree with whatever, how he talks about ankle dorsiflexion. If you have a stance on that, then I think the best thing you can do for yourself is delve into that a small bit more. Once you've delved into it and done your research, or maybe you have a certain level of experience or competence within the area, then you produce some sort of product around that. Whether that's a video, whether that's talking about it in a podcast, whether that's putting it on your story and talking about why you think this should be the way it is, rather than screenshotting somebody's post. Like I saw Aaron's a great example of that. Aaron had a post up where he was looking at the weightlifting shoes he kind of helped develop, and he had cut the sole out of them so you see how your foot sits in the bottom. And it's just a load of people screenshotting that post and talking about, like, they'd either make a meme out of it or they're just talking shit on it. Whereas it would be much more beneficial if you made a post and said, oh, when my feet are crammed into that tighter toe box, it has no effect, you know? Or maybe you would replicate a study or say, here's the top 30 weightlifters in the world, and they all like their toes to be crammed in. You know, like, that's a much more beneficial and a much more additive process, rather than kind of like hiding behind the keyboard and talking shit.
Now, not that memes don't have their place.
I love memes.
As someone who's been the originator of many memes,
the suspicious meme.
Suspicious, you're not talking, you know, there's place for memes, but the kind of personal things to some people is, you know, it's like, does it benefit anyone? Does it make it better? Now, there is a case, I know we've gone over time, but there's one thing I wanted to add, just in case people's mentioning. There is times when someone who's putting out blatantly dangerous stuff, or stuff that is very much not healthy for people, like it's a really bad idea for people to do, then in those scenarios, there is places for some people to make good videos on those and talk about why that you shouldn't be doing that, you know. Zach kind of does some stuff like that.
Absolutely.
And
the charlatan stuff.
Yeah, but when it's some difference in methodologies or difference of opinion or interpretation of data, I think it's important, because it's better for everyone, because it's confusing for other people, and we've gone way over time.
I do notice, right, you're very hard on the 10-minute stop when it's I'm making my point.
You just kept talking.
But when you have another point to make, it's kind of loosey-goosey.
Because this went from don't make negative comments to just the conceptual idea of making positive content more than not negative comments. But yeah, it's just things, be aware of the triggers, because I think a lot of times people don't think about that. You're just kind of, you get annoyed at something, and I don't even mean in training. I think that's a big thing. Like, you say anything. You can choose not to have opinion, and if it's something that goes against your opinion, does it matter?
I was this raised an interesting. We're gone way over. It's gone now, right?
It's gone, yeah.
10 minutes gone. This raised a really interesting point. So, you know, a few times a year I do those corporate webinars.
Yes.
So, company gets in touch with a company I used to work for, and we deliver a corporate webinar. Usually my ones are on like mental health in the workplace, or else performance psychology for like sales teams or high performing teams. And one of the ones on mental health in the workplace, we were talking about, so I usually go through some like tactics, some like little things people could use, and framing becomes one of them. And talking about framing, and in the case of mental health and framing interventions around exercise tend to be really useful, right? Most of the demographic here is like 30 to 55 years old, and people who are exercising for the improvement of their health and physical well-being, right? So how you could use framing to make you more compliant or do more physical activity. And somebody said, somebody wrote in during the questions and answers comment and said, I don't believe in this thing of positive psychology. She said, if I'm exercising and exercising doesn't bring me joy, then why would I ever exercise? Oh, and this the whole thing of like, this is a negative thing for me, so why would I try and make it a positive? Now, you've the immediate backup of saying that you need physical activity, and there's 150 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity is the minimum recommended requirement by the World Health Organization. But she was steadfast in that, you know?
Yes.
It's like, I just don't believe in this whole positive psychology thing. If I don't like it, I won't do it.
You've raised such an interesting thing in relation to philosophy, and a lot of them, and if you talk about Stoics a lot, it's like doing hard stuff. Or if you look at kind of, I don't know, modern day philosophers, like people like Jocko are like that, or Goggins, you know. I know you don't like Goggins, but I don't even pay much attention to him. But there's a lot of like modern day philosophers, I think it's fair to call them that in some ways.
Absolutely, yeah.
All of them talk about doing difficult stuff, and it's really hard to impart in someone definitive reasons of why doing hard stuff is really important for your life, you know, and it's something when you can give them the results in terms of like your biochemistry, but in terms of the effect in your life, it's very important to be doing difficult things. And it's really hard to convince people, because why shouldn't you just be really comfortable all the time? You know, why wouldn't you not just stay in bed? And how do we get onto this?
I'm not quite sure. But it's a very important note, right? Because there's at certain points or at certain troughs and peaks in people's well-being, doing things that are incredibly difficult is not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
There is some point. Now, I think people, like all the resilience literature would say you have to be doing things that are both physically and cognitively challenging. That's how you get better. Like that's how cold water immersion has been shown to increase state and trait resilience. So in most populations, that's why cold water immersion is so popular now. But there are definitely points where you probably shouldn't be thrashing yourself too hard if you're in one of those troughs. But we're way off the topic now.
I hope this is going in the 10-minute talk video on the 10-minute talk playlist, just for anyone wondering.
Please do let us know what you think about our studio. The back here is going to change.
Yes.
Slightly.
I love this setup.
Yeah. But
hopefully the audio quality is really important.
That's why the setup changed, really.
Yeah. Even though I do like these seats.
I love the seats.
Yeah. I think we're thinking wood paneling, but we got to end it. We got to end this video.
We've talked to
someone scrolling through this playlist.
It's been too long.
6 months time, right? They're scrolling through the 10-minute talk playlist.
This is 45 minutes long.
They're just listening to 10-minute talks.
Yeah.
And they're getting that same repetitive template and enjoyment of a particular style of video that you get when you find something new and you want to just watch more of them.
Isn't it?
And then all of a sudden, in the middle of this big fucking spot of a boil of a 15-minute, 10-minute talk, and you don't even know what the subject is anymore.
Anyway,
I know what happened is because we're using the Zoom microphones and using in the Shit Talk podcast.
Yeah. The Stag's Head is staying as well, by the way, so it has to be things that will work with that.
Okay, thanks for watching.